Arab civilization. The Arab civilization is one of the most important civilizations of the world. The geographical condition of Arabistan brought about many changes in the lives of the Arabs. In the 7th century, Arabs accepted Islam religion. Arab civilization emerged in the great peninsular region of Southwest Asia, which was initially under Egyptian and Roman cultures. Later, the Arabs occupied most of the region which came to be called Arabia, also known as Arabistan. Arabia is a vast region covered by rocks and deserts. So, the population of Arabia is very thin. Tribal Arabs settled in this region. They established their independent tribal states. There were constant fights in Arabia. The scarcity of means of income, limited agricultural land, and availability of pastoral land motivated the Arabs to accept animal husbandry as their main occupation. Arabs worshipped the meteoritic stone at Kaaba. It had become the pilgrimage center of Arabs. The Arabs used to visit Mecca in large numbers for pilgrimage. Musical and literary competitions were held in Mecca in the ancient days. Mecca had become the place for festivals of Arabs. The Arabs turned towards trading because of the scarcity of means of livelihood. They started trading with Eastern and Western countries. They used to import commodities from the Eastern countries like India and China and export them to the Western countries. The Arabs came into contact with the outer world because of their growing trade. Arab dominance in trade helped them in the improvement of their economic condition. The rise of Islam. The founder of Islam religion, the great Prophet Muhammad Paigambar, was born to Mecca's Qurayshi family in 571 AD. Muhammad's grandfather was the chief of the traders' caravans. Muhammad Paigambar carefully observed the religious beliefs and religious practices of Arab tribes. Archangel Gabriel, God's messenger, gave divine revelations to Prophet Muhammad. These revelations are compiled in a sacred book known as Holy Quran. Prophet Muhammad followed and preached these divine commands to the Arabs. His followers compiled an anthology of the Prophet's sayings, known as Hadith. The religion based on the sacred book, the Holy Quran, is called Islam, and its followers are known as Muslims or Musalmans. The first followers of Islam were Prophet Muhammad's wife Khadija, his son-in-law Ali, his friend Abu Bakr, and a companion Zayd. The Arabs accepted the new religion, Islam. Orthodox Arabs started troubling Prophet Muhammad and his followers. The persecution and dominance was more in Mecca. Therefore, Muhammad's followers invited him to Medina. Accordingly, Prophet Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina in 622 AD. This historic event is known as Hijrah. The Islamic calendar, Hijrat, begins with this event. Teaching of Islam. The word Islam means complete surrender and deep faith in God. The teaching of Islam is as follows. Allah is the One Almighty and Muhammad is His Prophet. Every Muslim has to obey the Holy Quran and believe in the day of Qiyamah. Qiyamah is a day when Allah passes His judgment at the end after weighing a person's good and evil deeds. Every Muslim should follow the 5 commands according to Islam. They are Kalma, Allah is the One Almighty and Muhammad is His Prophet. This line is called Kalma. Every Muslim must pronounce this article of faith. Namaz, prayer. Every Muslim must offer prayer 5 times a day. Roza, fasting. During the month of Ramzan, a Muslim must observe total fasting without water. Zakat, charity. Every wealthy Muslim should give 2.5% of his income as charity or alms. Hajj, pilgrimage. A Muslim should undertake, as far as possible, a pilgrimage to Mecca, that is, Hajj, in a lifetime. There is no place for rituals in Islam. It also rejects idol worship. Islam teaches respect for parents, equal justice for all, and prohibits consumption of intoxicants. Spread of Islam. Prophet Muhammad organized a new theocratic state at Medina. All practices and laws were based on the Quran. Prophet Muhammad conquered the neighboring cities of Medina in 630 AD. He entered Mecca victorious. After the victory over Mecca, other tribes in Arabia accepted Islam. Thus, Prophet Muhammad successfully spread Islam all over Arabistan. Caliphate. After the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD, Abu Bakr succeeded him as the Caliph, the supreme religious head of all the Muslims. The first four caliphs were Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, and Ali. All of them were Prophet Muhammad's companions. The regime of Caliph Harun al-Rashid was the glorious period in the history of the Arab Empire. There was development in science and literature. Arabistan became financially strong. Harun al-Rashid received immense popularity as the hero of a famous book, Arabian Nights. Expansion of the Arab Empire. Arabia was united into a state by Prophet Muhammad. He spread the principles of Islam in Arabia. His successor, Abu Bakr, became the first caliph. Abu Bakr conquered parts of Syria from the Byzantine Empire. The remaining parts of Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Egypt were conquered by the next caliph, Umar. The Arab Empire expanded widely in North Africa, West Asia, and Spain of Europe. Under the Umayyad dynasty of caliphs, the Arabs expanded the empire up to Samarkand in the east and Sindh in the south. The influence of the Arabs reached India in the 8th century AD. The Turkish tribes also accepted Islam. The Abbasids followed the Umayyad dynasty to the throne. The Arabs shifted the capital from Damascus to Baghdad. In a very short span, Baghdad was recognized as a glorious city. With the rise of the Turks in 1258 AD, the Arab Empire began to disintegrate. Arabs' economic life. There was remarkable progress in trade and commerce. The Arabs made great progress in the metal industries of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. They used to make fine quality glassware and earthenware. They were known for weaving and dyeing skills, manufacturing various products from leather, and for making perfumes and scents. After the fall of the Holy Roman Empire, the Arabs controlled world trade routes. They established their supremacy in international trade. As a result, Baghdad, Bukhara, and Damascus became centers of international trade. Thus, Arab trade brought the Eastern and Western worlds together. The Arabs cultivated various crops depending upon the availability of water. They knew how to harvest water and use fertilizers. They acquired great skill in flower and fruit plantation. The contribution of the Arabs to trade and agriculture enriched their economic life. Arabs' cultural life. The Arabs attained great progress in culture in the 500 years since the establishment of Islam. The Arabs accepted the influence of Greek and Roman cultures of Europe and the Persian and Indian cultures of Asia. The Arabs formed their new culture by integrating various cultures with Arab culture. The caliphs expanded their empire and also spread their religion. They did remarkable work in the fields of art, science and architecture. Mecca, Medina and Jerusalem emerged as religious centers. Baghdad, Bukhara and Samarkand emerged as trade centers. Cordova and Lisbon became centers of education. Contribution of Arabs. The Arabs' contribution in enrichment of world culture is very significant. The Arabs were expert in designing precious jewelry and metal urns. They were advanced in trade. Trade of horses. They established their monopoly in trading of horses. The Arabs reached China for silk business. They obtained the techniques of manufacturing paper, the knowledge of gunpowder, the compass and porcelain, and carried it to Europe. Arab traders introduced a number of new varieties of plants to Europe. Fruits like orange, lemon, apricot, peaches, and various kinds of beautiful flowers were introduced to Europe by Arabs. There was remarkable advancement in the fields of learning, literature, and science. Baghdad city became a renowned center of international trade and education. Various books were translated at Baghdad. There was a huge library and an academy with a translation bureau at Baghdad. So it was known as the House of Wisdom. The Arabs distinguished themselves in the field of learning. About 12,000 students were studying at one time at the University of Al-Azhar. Similarly, the universities of Cordova and Lisbon became very popular centers for learning. Knowledge of science and literature. The Arabs contributed greatly in the fields of learning, literature and science. They produced great poets, philosophers, scientists and historians. The Arabs produced a new form of poetry in the form of prose known as qasida and hikayat. The world-famous stories of the Arabian Nights were written during Arab rule. Ibn Rashid was a great Arabian scholar. Sinna, also known as Avicenna, was known as the Prince of Arabian scholarship for his notable contribution. He wrote many books on medicine, philosophy, geometry, astronomy, etc. He introduced the philosophy of the ancient Greeks to the Arabs. The famous poet Omar Khayyam and a great philosopher Ibn Khaldun also belonged to the same age. The mathematical term algebra has its origin in the Arab language. Historian Al-Baruni visited India in the 10th century. He was greatly influenced by Indian philosophy. His Tariq-e-Hind is an important work. Ibn Battuta, another historian who wrote Safarnama, came to India and was influenced by it. Ibn Khaldun was a great Spanish Arab historian of that age. Art and architecture. The Arabs contributed a lot to the development of art and architecture. They built new highways and repaired the trade routes of the Romans. They built canals for water irrigation. The Arabs introduced the beautiful skill of architecture. Semicircular arches, domes, tall minarets, beautifully carved designs and filigree work were the marks of Arab architecture. The mosques at Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, Cairo, Cordova and Samarkand exemplify the skills of the Arabs. The magnificent palaces at Damascus, Baghdad, Istanbul were built in white marble and carved and painted beautifully. The beautiful gardens in Arabian cities are witness to the love of art among Arabians. The Arabs propagated their religion and increased their trade with the expansion of power. They attained progress in art and architecture. They preserved ancient learning and science. Even the European Renaissance was directly or indirectly inspired by the Arabs. Thus, Arabian culture was truly a link between Eastern and Western culture.